Well, hello there. Pat here. And I've been thinking, and you know what happens when I get thinking? Well, I start pondering some important lessons. And this is a biggie. It's going to seem super simple, but I believe it's incredibly profound. And I want to share with you my thoughts on this. One of the most challenging analyses you'll do is how do you know when you're done with basics or done with a step in basics? Sometimes it feels like you can dwell on it too long. Sometimes you fly through it. And I'll tell you, when I ask people, when I go to workshops or I work with some dogs that I haven't seen before, and I ask them, how did basics go? And they say, oh, it went great. We didn't have any problems. Well, to me, that's scary because you've got to conquer some issues. You've got to climb a few hills along the way. You've got to be a little battle tested because when you get into advanced training, you're going to have some problems. It's inevitable. But there are two things that I want to talk about, and I want to share with you my thoughts. And I'm passionate about these thoughts. My number one priority in basics. It is the response to direct pressure on two main commands, back and sit. Sounds simple, doesn't it? Well, first of all, let's talk about the difference between direct pressure and indirect pressure. The two commands I just described, back and sit, those are the ones I'm going to be using direct pressure on. Back is an extension of fetch, and sit is sit. But what I'm going to talk about here is the response to a sit whistle and the application of direct pressure to reinforce a sharp sit, and the application of direct pressure to reinforce going back. Now let's get back to the discussion about direct versus indirect pressure. Direct pressure is really quite simple, and you use it early on in your early obedience work. When you say sit, maybe you tug up on the lead a little bit or you push down on the puppy's butt to just manufacture a sit. Well, that is direct pressure on the command sit. It's not a lot of pressure, but it is pressure. It is something where you are administering a stimulus or something in that regards, and we're going to talk about e-collars later on, but when you put a pressure to do a specific task, that is direct pressure. Come, a tug on the lead, direct pressure. Now we use indirect pressure and we'll oftentimes do sit with some form of pressure, and then the carryover from that disciplined behavior benefits the next behavior. So most of the time, when you are trying to get a dog to take a cast and change direction and they don't want to do it, and you give them a whistle and you give them a nick with the collar, well, that's direct pressure on sit, but it's indirect pressure on the task that was happening, which was the failure to cast. And the first thing you do after the application of direct pressure on the sit gets the benefit of the indirect pressure process. So it's a wake-up call. It's a pay attention. But that's not where I'm going with this. Where I'm going with this is when you force on back and back with e-collar pressure, you want to make absolutely certain your dog's response to being forced is pretty much foolproof. Now, when you do some of the early pile work and you nick on back and the dog's going anyways and you think, well, I forced. Well, I am not satisfied that their response to being forced on back is where I want it to be until I meet a situation where they pop or they don't want to go. Either the rules have gotten in the way or they've decided, you know what, I'm just going to turn around and have you tell me what to do. And you want to go back with pressure, or a dog gets in a quandary on a blind and starts to come in and says, I give, I'm coming home. Can you force your dog on back there? I bet, well, probably a third of the time it works when I'm at a workshop. When I have seen a dog and I can see the telltale signs that I don't think this dog's response to being forced is going to be where we need it to be, and we force on back and the dog continues to come in, well, now we got a problem. Because the behavior that occurs after the pressure goes away is the behavior that's being reinforced. So if I go back with pressure and the dog doesn't go back, well, whatever he's doing, whether it's coming in or just sitting there, when the pressure goes away, is really the behavior that I am reinforcing. And if they're not going back, I'm not getting the right response, and I'm not going to be able to use direct pressure. And it is crucial because it's going to be needed to be used at some point. Not all the time, but at some point. Same thing on a sit whistle. If a dog slips a whistle and doesn't want to stop because he smells a bird or he thinks he's near the blind or whatever the case is, and I blow a sit whistle and I correct with the collar on sit, and the dog starts coming in or doesn't sit, well, once again, I've got a problem because I'm reinforcing not sitting. I want to repeat something I said a minute ago. They are not forced on back and they are not properly prepared for correction on sit until you are able to use direct pressure when they don't want to do one of those two commands, and then you get the right response. It's easy when they're going to do it anyways. It's not easy when they are, I don't know if I'd say a belligerent state, but in a state that they're just not responding, and you're going to use direct pressure. Why am I so passionate about this? Because I see dogs that really aren't thoroughly prepared for these two commands. If you only got two things done coming out of basics, two things: a solid force when you need it, and a solid stop and ability to reinforce stopping when you need that. Those two things are rock solid. If it works at 250 yards, or it works when a dog decides I'm not getting in the water, or I don't like the cast you're giving me and I'm just going to come in, can you force then? And can you get a dog stopped with pressure in a crucial state? Take a look at that. Think about it. It's one of the, if not the most important priority there is. So, well, direct pressure on a whistle stop and an understanding to being forced when a dog doesn't want to go, because they're not really forced until you can make them go when they don't want to go for whatever reason. It's not usually a desire thing. It's an avoidance response. Maybe they're just more rules that they want to deal with at that point. So I hope that's helpful. And well, that's what I've got to share with you. It's a good thing to think about and ponder kicking off the year of 2025. Thanks for joining me. Happy training, folks. Bye-bye.